In the southern oceans of Dominia Prime lay a continent of great kingdoms. Far from the war between Urza and Mishra, the lands of Sarpedia prospered. But as the climate changed, resources dwindled and empires crumbled. Hideous new species arose in the forests and the seas, forcing the Sarpedians to fight for their very survival. Recruit these toughened warriors and vicious predators for your duels, but beware, lest you fare no better than the fallen empires.
So welcome back to Volume 4 of our deep dive into the flavor of Fallen Empires.
Welcome back.
Yeah, it's now, 30 years and 3 days old?
Yes, we have just passed the...
My Fallen Empire flannel.
Don't forget the flannel,
it's
that's
here.
Very important.
It's a little warm in here, but I cannot break tradition.
No, you have to wear it.
Yep.
You promised us you would wear it the entire time.
Yes. Or lose it. One
of the two, so...
I haven't lost it.
You haven't lost it yet.
Yay, congratulations to me. We're going in Wooburg order, but we started with red for reasons.
Right, for reasons.
And one of those reasons, at least from my perspective, will become apparent in just a moment. So let me bring up a graphic which we have used numerous times in this series already. This is a graphic I call the Wheel of Conflict, which has amused me to no end, and I really wanted to use it on video so everyone else could know what this is called. But as we can visually see here, Fallen Empires is arranged in factions, 2 factions per color. Usually it's a civilization and an invading army of sorts. But white is kind of unique in that it's really kind of the same faction. It's the humans collectively, and the Feralites they really are truly a faction rather than a rival civilization. They are kind of on the same side, and there's a quote from the duelist.
Let's see what this excerpt says.
Yeah.
So many believe His Majesty's government has shown the followers of Turok too much lenience. Oliver Farrell, a former priest, has been particularly vocal and seems to be gaining a large following. This is credited to Lady Margaret Ellsworth.
Right, who is a name that I think is only used in the flavor articles, the epistolary stories about Fallen Empires in Duelist number 3. But that describes who Farrell is, and Farrell is just leads a group of the Acacians to be more zealous in their persecution of the Ebon Hand. That's his deal. It's like, yeah, I know we're fighting goblins and trying to survive, but the Ebon Hand still exists.
Yeah, he's like, that is a secondary problem.
Yeah,
those guys existing over there, we cannot let that stand.
Yeah, and I think we'll come to some flavor text later about how they actually part ways.
Okay.
I don't think they're ever even in open combat with each other though, unlike every other faction.
Ideological differences.
The other factions here, this is about genocide.
Yeah.
The goblins, orcs are going to wipe out the dwarves. The Thalids are going to wipe out the elves.
Yeah.
The humans are just kind of ornery with each other.
They just can't agree on this.
Yeah. And the other really interesting thing before we get into the individual cards is that Fallen Empires takes place years before the Grand Creature type update. And so for the first 10 years of Magic, a creature got 1 creature type. And if it was a human, it just got what we would call its class, right? It can be a druid, it can be a cleric.
Be like a cleric, soldier, whatever.
And we're going to see a lot of soldiers in this set. That, not to bury the lead, the soldiers is really the type that white is built around in Fallen Empires. But then everything that's like a non-sentient being, well, it's just a beast, or it's just a lobster, or whatever it is.
Whatever the creature type.
But it wasn't until Mirrodin that they started giving humanoids or sentient beings both a race and a class. So you had weird stuff like Elvish Healer in Ice Age. Elvish is right in the name, but it's a cleric. They had to decide, are we going to make this a type elf, or are we going to make it a type cleric? When obviously it should be an elf cleric, but the design of the game was such that you could not do that.
That just wasn't part of the structure
until 2003. And then in 2007, a few years after they had introduced human cleric and all that variants, they went back and retconned everything before. So now all these Fallen Empire cards have errata that they're all human soldier or whatnot. But at the time this came out.
Was it? I think it was around... I'll have to look and see, or we can fact check this.
Yeah.
But they also did something like that around the same time, I think, that March of the Machine came out, or All Will Be One, where they updated a lot of creatures to be Phyrexian that were not previously typed as Phyrexians.
Yeah. Yeah, they've done some iterations. So they did that with dog.
That's right.
The forever problem. Our hounds are dogs instead of dogs being... Yeah.
They eroded that to be true.
Yeah, it just all the hound creature type was around since nearly the beginning.
Yeah.
But the reason I call it the Grand Creature Type Update is because there was an article in 2007 called
Titled
The Grand Creature Type Update. So that's when they did the big sweeping revisions, and they did some interesting things like the only creature that has no type is Nameless Race, because that's just flavorful. And that came out of that change. But not to get too far off track, the third interesting thing about the Acacians, and let's start looking at the Acacians specifically. We are going to, I think, break it up as we have been into the two factions, and we'll start with the big one. And are they big? The number of creatures in the Acacian faction, the number of cards, is just... It's actually not the largest in the set. It ties with the Thralls, who we'll get to in our last volume, but it is larger than anything we've looked at thus far. It's a very big number, and I think that in itself says a lot about the flavor. In a lot of fantasy settings, humans are contrasted with other races, like elves and dwarves, in that we are short-lived and numerous, and... greedy, but
yes.
But we are portrayed as working together really well, and I think those two things are what we see here. We see a lot of humans, and they work together well.
Okay. I'm kind of thinking of, ever since you brought up the term as fan in our draft video, I'm kind of thinking about this in that terms now, that like if you opened a pack of this, it seems that you would probably see more human creatures than you would of any of these other types that we've looked at thus far. Yeah,
and so I noticed when we were looking at elves, there are a few of them. And so for human, or for the soldier, the humans, the Acacians, for the Acacians, to simplify things, we have 12 common cards that are, or more than that, because these are also common, and these are common. So three sets of common 4s and 2 sets of common 3s. Whereas for the elves, the entire creature type, I think there were 2 common 3s?
Yeah, not as many. Not nearly as many.
And they have 1 uncommon elf. So it's a much smaller group. And that kind of says something interesting from a storytelling perspective, right? Like the elven civilization is much smaller, and there are just a lot of humans.
Yeah.
Whereas the Thalids and the Thralls, these kind of races that start breeding uncontrollably, they are very numerous.
Yeah, that makes sense from a flavor perspective, that we should see a lot more of some of these creature types than we should see of the longer lived elves. And I guess we didn't have quite so many. I can't remember how many goblins we had.
Not many.
Not as many.
Because there were so many goblins printed to the game prior to this, I think was their motivation. So we got a fair number of orcs, new orcs, but just like 1 new goblin, the Chirurgeon. Chirurgeon. And we got the goblin kites on the war barge. Oh no, I'm gonna pull up the picture.
We need the visual aid for this.
We do.
But yes, suffice it to say, there are more Acacians than we have seen of any singular group thus far. Yeah,
and then... Oh, and also there are no commons in white that are not creatures.
Okay.
Whereas with the elves had their Elven Fortress was a common.
That's right.
So there's just a little more variety in everything we've looked at thus far. The Goblin Grenade.
Right. So this is kind of, I think white has, I don't know when it started to be discussed in this way, but definitely has kind of a white weenies archetype of having a lot of small but numerous critters.
Yeah, and we lean into that here. So let's actually start looking at the individual cards, and we'll start with Acacian Infantry, which is, of course, a soldier.
Here we go. Let's take a look at these guys.
I pulled these up on the bigger viewer.
Let's see the large print version. Let's look at this one with the Edward Beard Jr. art.
Yeah.
So this is just a 1/1 for 1. But it has a couple of abilities.
Yeah.
The first one being pay 1, bans until end of turn. And the second one, pay 1, first strike until end of turn.
Yeah.
So let's talk about banding a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I was trying to foreshadow with the talk about humans cooperating well. I think banding, I understand why it has been phased out of the game. It hasn't been eroded out. You can still play banding creatures, but they do not print new ones because it is rather confusing. It works differently on attacking versus blocking. I haven't considered how it's affected by the new change to combat rules. Probably not much.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing.
But if you have a band, which I think you just have to have one banding creature if you're blocking with if you're multi-blocking, but you can also attack as a band as if it's one creature if all the creatures except one have banding. And then you, who are the controller of the band, get to decide how your opponent assigns combat damage to those creatures. And I think you can just over-assign a bunch of damage all to one thing.
I think that's how it works, that you get the power to do that. I think it's really interesting that this card has no reminder text, so if you don't know what banding means, good luck.
That was in Alpha, Benalish Hero.
Yeah.
Like, one of the core defining white Alpha cards. I think the Mesa Pegasus had it too, like flying in. Yeah, that was everywhere. You were going to figure it out.
You just got to figure it out. What does banding mean?
But I do love the flavor of that if you just get a bunch of vacation infantry on the battlefield and you got a bunch of mana, again, we're not looking this mechanically, we're like in gameplay balance-wise, we're looking flavorfully. If you have a bunch of them, you can just pump a bunch of mana into them and make them into one big formidable fighting force. And
I do want to point out that these are one generic abilities, so if you're playing a multicolored deck, it doesn't even have this isn't something that depends on you really speccing into white specifically. You can pay for that with whatever resource you have.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a neat flavor mechanic that does not. There's some things that really reward you for leaning into that color, and this you just have to pay white to get the critter out there, and then you can use whatever you want to pay for the rest of this.
Yeah. So you want to look at the art and flavor text of these guys?
So this one says, the Acacian army easily repelled early surprise attacks by the orcs on bordered towns like Montford. So we've talked about the orcs a bit before in our goblins video, orcs video, the red color focus. So one of the things we had talked about was like, how did the dwarves get overpowered by these orcs that were kind of thought to be sort of cowardly, easy to, like, as soon as things go bad, they're out.
Yeah.
But again, apparently their surprise attacks were not as useful against the numerous Acacian infantry.
Yeah.
I like this art. I think it's interesting to have such a dark figure on a white card.
That's true.
Because, like, at a glance, like, this character reads more like, oh, this is going to be like a black alliance.
This is an anti-hero.
Yeah, this is
vibe.
An anti-hero vibe. This is not what I imagine when I think of like a typical like white soldier human in Magic, but I think it's really cool, and I like the very stark background. I like that we have this highly detailed figure, so we don't have a lot of distraction going on behind him.
Yeah,
we can really focus on this dude, which is I think that's a neat touch, because they could have really gone overboard with the background, and they didn't.
It's neat. Then we have the Christopher Rush art with the flavor text. Although they had long been concerned about the Order of the Ebon Hand, the Acacians faced an even greater threat from goblin and orcish raiders. And so, we're just building this narrative that both they traditionally were the enemy of the black faction of humanoids, the Ebon Hand. As we mentioned, Farrell is fixated on that.
Yes.
And doesn't want to turn his attention to the goblins and orcs,
like the actual threat that
who end up defeating the humans and destroying the civilization. Yeah.
But yeah, the Ebon Hand, they gotta go.
What's in the art of this? What's in the lower right background? Is that just a sprig of grass on rocks?
Can we zoom in on that?
Because I think it should be a mantis. I don't think it is.
I would love for it to be a mantis.
I don't think it is, but I want it to be a mantis.
But what if it was a mantis?
Yeah, that'd be cool. You could pretend. I think that's a
Use
rock
your
with grass.
imagination. If I take my glasses off, it's a mantis.
Those little dots right there are eyes.
That's the eyes, yep. Yeah. I can see the little
That's
raptorial claw. We're there.
What's it called?
The raptorial claw.
Raptorial claw, that's perfect.
Yeah, or it might be raptorial arm. I forget. It's the
I'm happy.
The part
with the adjective of raptorial
grabs the prey and holds it.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, this is interesting. He has a very different look. Again, a lot of dark colors, but very different look than the other one that we saw.
Yeah.
This one looks, I don't know if maybe he's like a higher ranking infantry, but he's got a really cool bird-like helmet sort of thing.
Yeah. And it's interesting that the shield is sort of in the foreground here, partially blocking our view.
Yeah.
I actually, is that the same person holding that, or is that like a closer soldier to us?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, it's
hard to
interesting
say.
that some of these
I
are...
think it probably is meant to be the same person,
think so.
just because of how he's posed.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's neat.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that these two we've looked at so far are a lone figure then, and the other two are multiple.
So this next one here is Douglas Schuler's illustration, and now we've got 3 figures depicted. So this kind of leans more into the banding aspect. Maybe the other 2 are meant to depict the first strike, like they're
honestly, that makes
more,
sense. Martial prowess.
Yeah, where these guys, like, they look a little bit less intimidating on their own, but there's 3 of them.
Yeah.
So now we have this more generic-looking soldier. They don't have their armor's much less impressive. It looks like they're just kind of wearing like maybe a thick tunic over some long sleeves.
Yeah.
They don't have any shields that we can see. The guys in the back have swords.
They have them on their tunics.
They have them on their tunics, but that's just the idea of a shield. They don't have, they don't have any actual armor.
It's the concept of a shield.
It's the concept of a shield. So yeah, they're much less protected, but they have the strength in numbers.
And I like that as a representation of what this card is mechanically doing the best. Like the other two, they're cool. They are cool. But they are they're individual heroes.
Yes.
They are like the Benalish hero.
Yeah.
This is a group of infantry in the same spirit as like the massive human faction is in Warhammer.
Okay,
where the Imperial Guard.
This
just
feels
like,
more like, look, we
just got all of us.
There's just a bunch of us.
Yeah.
Like individually, we're not that impressive, but there's a lot of us.
Yeah.
So this one says, Valiant Acacia was the last of the Sarpadian empires to fall. Its faithful soldiers defended their cities to the very end. Sarpadian Empires, Volume 6.
Yeah. And then the last one we have is Drew Tucker's art, also depicting a trio. It really, I think it's a very similar effect, but just a very different art style, which is... This might be the most... representational of Drew Tucker's art, because Drew Tucker, we looked at his Night Soil last time, a lot of really impressionistic to the point of the abstract, but this is just impressionistic.
Yeah, this is really nice. It looks very watercolor. I don't know what media this is, but I really like the colors used in the sky and the shadows that we see on these figures. And so in our last one, we did get this kind of foreshadowing that this does not go well for the humans, despite their strength in numbers. But they are very brave. The flavor text on this one says, "Never surrender," motto carved into a fragment of an Acacian wall, which is another nice bit of storytelling there, that we're seeing this in the fragments.
It really
of the
is.
wall.
That has that same thing, that same feeling as like the Fallout games are known for their environmental storytelling, where you just wander around and find these remains of people and kind of see a story. And that has that same feeling.
Yeah, this isn't on a monument somewhere.
Yeah. But I have gone back and forth, and I was actually commenting on one of our previous videos about Drew Tucker's art in early Magic, and I can't decide if I like it there or not.
Okay.
Because it's just so... It doesn't seem to often serve the main role that art in a card game does. It doesn't show you a representation of what the card is, like in the Night Soil. Yeah. But this one does.
This is a good example.
And I love this, and I feel like this is serving the same role of this era in Magic as we have a few artists in the present day who have like I gotta look it up.
Oh, okay. Yes.
A.M. Sartor, right? Like has this sort of woodcut style, and who is I think there's Sam Gay is a little bit.
Is it Wiley?
Wiley Beckert. That's
name.
it.
Yeah.
Wiley Beckert.
So these are the artists that have these kind of more individualistic standout styles that contrast with the other. It's not quite homogenous, but most Magic art has kind of a unifying look to it. And they seem to still like doing this, where they'll kind of pepper in a few of these more individualistic standout pieces that don't really look like anything else in the game.
Yeah. And I love that. And I love that it's happening now. And I feel like the current trend is sort of a reaction to not doing that for a while.
Yeah, there was a while where it did feel like we were kind of veering more toward a more homogenous look for the game.
It was a high-quality homogenous
very
look.
high quality. Just like everything kind of had the same look to it.
And I think early Magic did have, I want to say, too much variety. I like that they consolidated a little bit. I'm really happy with what we've got in the present day. I think it's a real high quality. But this one really does work for me. I have no no qualms, no doubts that this particular Drew Tucker piece
I mean, at the risk of getting into the weeds too much, we do tend to go on tangents quite often. But aside from, like, the unifying look of a Magic card, you know, in the early days, I can definitely see where there was more experimentation of kind of figuring out, like, what is this game going to look like? And aside from, you know, the unifying border and the formatting, I think there is something to be said for having something that you can at a glance look at and be like, this is Magic.
Yeah.
Not some other card game. Because there's only so many ways you can kind of format title, rules, power, toughness, which is what, you know, most games more or less include to some variant degree. So I get that, you know, I get the like, okay, we can't just have all these wildly different art styles where you pick something up and it's not immediately recognizable as being part of this world. But I do like when they kind of sprinkle it here and then. It makes it a little spicy.
Yeah, so those are the infantry, and I think of those as just the most common of the commons. They are your most fundamental. Hey, we got some foot soldiers for you. You want a soldier deck? Here you go.
Yes, here they are.
And it's interesting. Let's go on another tangent. That soldiers have just recently had a big time in the sun in Standard. I mean, they've kind of been moved out now, but like a year ago, Azoria Soldiers was one of the really dominant ones, at least in the best of one meta. And that was
pretty cool, though. I mean, that's still a supported thing.
The game. And that was largely courtesy of the Brothers' War, because there were so many soldiers in that. Good old Harbin. But next among the soldiers here is the Acacian Scout. Agreed.
Oh, I've got some things to say about one of these. But we're going to get to that one in a minute.
I have a guess.
Guess which one it is. So first off, we've got a Richard Kane Ferguson illustration. So this is a 1/1 for 1 soldier. This ability is 1 and tap. Target creature gains first strike until end of turn.
Yeah, that's interesting. Hold on a second. The soldier, the infantry only gives it to themselves. Right, okay. So that, I was thinking, why does this have just a strict downgrade on that? No, this gives it to someone else.
So
that's great.
This is interesting, because, like, this is a scout, so it's not necessarily a soldier, but it can help somebody else out.
But it's typed as a soldier.
It's typed as a soldier, but, like, functionally.
Right, but it's distinct from an infantry person.
Distinct from, like, these guys are not on the first line, like, on the front lines. They're more, you know, scouting. They're
around the front lines.
They're around, they're gathering information. Maybe they're alerting the infantry to an orc sneak attack.
I love that flavor. That's amazing. That's what a scout does. Because like the orc scout, or no, the orcish spy, they just look at your opponent's library, which that does make sense mechanically within the context of Magic. But in terms of this group of common soldiers in white forming a coherent mechanical theme, that's really cool that they can give any other creature the intelligence they need to ambush the enemy, basically.
So this one says, because the orc hordes attacked along the entire border, scouts were essential to Acacia's defense. Sarpadian Empires, Volume 6.
You're better with Roman numerals than I am. I keep parsing that as 4 in my mind, and then you say it, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. When it of course makes sense because they were the last to fall, so of course they're volume 6.
Yeah, so they're in the final chapter.
Yeah, but that's an interesting piece of information that there are so many orcs, and we've talked about that before. Why were the orcs, who are continually described as cowardly, how are they able to overtake things? Well, it's because they just grew in numbers to this point. And the Richard Kane Ferguson art. Often, my estimation of his art is I can't really tell with as much clarity what's going on, but I sure love the style, and that's absolutely what's happening here. In his absolute best pieces, both, it's easy to tell what's going on, and I love the style. In some of his newer stuff, it's been too busy for me, but this is just quite solid.
Yeah, stylistically, I really like this. I think at card size, it's a little difficult to read.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, like, at a glance, my first impression is, like, I'm not sure what's exactly is going on here, but, you know, the longer you look at it, I can see the figure. It looks like he is looking off into the distance, and there may be, I don't know if that's like a invading orc army, maybe holding flags or something.
Oh, back there.
I'm trying to figure out what's going on over that hill. But I do love the soft colors in this, kind of the muted greens
Yeah.
and like almost... I guess there's not really, like, it's very dark, but there's not actually a lot of solid black in this piece. It's more
Yeah.
like charcoal, very dark greens, and then some really nice fading as we get to that really bright spot of light as he's looking off into the
And
sky.
that does make it fit in with the other white cards
Yeah.
with all that dark shading. Wow, that's neat. I hadn't really thought about it at that level. That's great.
Yeah, I quite like this a lot. I think this is really cool, and it depicts someone who is, like, functionally, I think does a good job of illustrating, like, what this card does in the game.
Yeah. And how about the Douglas Schuler art?
So this next one, we have a figure who looks like they're coming out of a wheat field or something. Again, not someone who's dressed for war, but I could see this being a good way to scout the borders without drawing attention.
Right,
You're just posing
you're
as
a peasant.
farmer.
Yeah.
I'm just a peasant. Like, don't worry about
Truly,
what I'm doing.
that makes sense, yeah.
So this one says, let it be known that Ilis Connet acted with honor and bravery in the defense of the town of Montfort, risking her life to scout the enemy's position. Proclamation granting knighthood.
Oh, nice.
So this one has a bit more of a nice ending, it sounds like. But it sounds like she is knighted after this instead of some of the other flavors that have kind of indicated, like, well, and then everybody died.
Yeah. Wizards, we need a legendary A-list Connacht, please.
Yeah, that would be really
you.
cool.
And that one, I like these two side by side. We can have a spring and fall kind of.
Yeah.
Spring and autumn.
I think we could do with more of that. I really liked that in Bloomborough, where we had things in different seasons. So yeah, the other one very fall or very spring, summer. This one definitely has those nice rich fall colors. I like that a lot too.
And if that's the case, the next one could be winter.
It could be, yeah. So our next one, this is illustrated by Rob Alexander, and it says, "Of course I'm not a spy. The enemy has spies. I am a scout." And this is
Same attribution.
credited once again to Ilis Connet. So that's kind of an interesting way of looking at ideology, where you're not really acknowledging that what you're doing is spying, because you are one of the good guys.
Yeah.
You're a scout.
Yeah, that's some good propaganda work there.
Exactly.
Maybe it's not good propaganda because it's so obvious, but it's some...
It's recognizable propaganda.
That's some interesting commentary on propaganda there.
It is, yes. So we have what I presume to be the same character.
I had not realized that until now.
Just sort of sitting and contemplating perhaps the position they hold in the world as a scout and not a spy.
It looks like there's a line, probably an army marching on the far distance there that I guess this person's spying on, but they don't. They look real sad.
Yeah, they don't look like they're taking action. This is a lot more of a quiet piece. It's a very nice piece.
It's despairing.
But yeah, I don't feel like this one is quite as good as the other two in showing Acacian Scout as a character. Because this does feel a lot more despair. It feels a lot more sad. And it feels less like they're taking action of any kind.
Yeah. All right, and then our last one, which I think you have something to say about. So if these three are seasons, like
I sure do.
Spring, fall, and winter, that's not summer. That's like psychedelic mushroom time.
This is psychedelic. So this is the Phil Folio art. So same creature type. I do want to point out that we have not moved on. This is also an Acacian Scout.
Yes.
This is a bat. That's a bat.
Yeah.
Same card, it says, scouting is the art of balancing the need to go undiscovered with the need to get all the information you can. It's only by Lightbear's good grace that I'm still alive today. Ilis Connet's diary.
There we go.
What that has to do with this bat, I don't know.
I think you haven't seen what I didn't see until I was preparing for this episode, which is that there is a person writing on the back of the bat.
What?
Look at that.
Where?
They're very small compared to the bat. It's a giant bat. This is a head. This is a jacket. Here's their hand holding onto a hat. Here's a leg.
I didn't see that at all.
Yeah, this is actually like the predecessor of the Oltec Backriders.
Yeah, okay. Well, that changes things, because I had a lot of questions about what happened, like what lengths Ilis went to disguise themselves as a bat. But no, this makes a lot more sense. They're riding a bat. They're risking their lives to gain knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they might be tripping on mushrooms. I don't know. The sky behind them, very
Yeah,
ambiguous.
this never happened. No one else on the continent of Sarpedia has ever seen a bat you can ride, but Ilas came back swearing this is what she just did.
Very lengthy report.
This is how I saw that army.
Yes, and they're like, okay,
and she was right, so they were like,
they were
okay,
like, you know what?
okay,
That's
sure.
fine, cool. You know what? Great. We're really glad that this all worked out. Yeah. So this one, is it the best at illustrating what this card is about? I don't know, but is it my favorite? Yes. Without a doubt.
Whimsy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So going back to the concept of the grand creature type update, generally, I think it was very helpful for the design of the game that they were able to take that elvish cleric and make it type elf cleric. But on cards like this one, where is that a bat? You know, like we have that kind of question where they had multiple arts, which wasn't a big part of the game. But in this time period, we have cards that make that very difficult, because what if two of the arts or more of the arts have different creatures depicted on them? We'll come to at least one example of that on our final episode, but we'll save that. Okay, so that's our scout. We good on the scout?
Yeah, let's move on to our next one.
Let's move on to the Javelineers.
Okay, so this one has 3 different depictions.
Yes, common 3.
So we'll start with this one with the Melissa Benson art. So this is, again, a 1-drop 1/1. When occasion Javelineers is brought into play, put a javelin counter on it.
1.
Are there javelin counters on that list of tokens and counters that we found?
Not on that side. Let's see if I can get the image of the other side up here. Net spore.
Oh, there are javelins.
Oh, yep,
so
sure.
this does come with javelin counters.
I don't think the person who drew that knew what a javelin was.
Yeah, I
that
don't know
looks
what
like
that is.
A Mardi Gras mask.
But that's a javelin counter.
Sure.
So yeah, when this
Oh, I know what that is. That's a reference to the art of the last one.
Okay.
The Scott Kirshner.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Get back to it.
But yeah, this one, so when it comes in, you put a javelin counter on it, and then you can tap it to remove the javelin counter to have it deal 1 damage to any target.
Yeah.
Which, that works. It's quite flavorful, because a javelin is a throwing weapon.
Yep.
So that works in the sense that, yes, it could be used in closer combat, or you could fling it.
Yep. Yeah, flavor is great. The art here doesn't quite match it up, because they've got a bunch of extra javelins.
They have a lot of extra javelins.
But in mechanical balance, Prodigal Sorcerer is the creature from Alpha that does this effect, basically, and it's 2 and a blue for the same creature, except you can use it every turn. So how do you scale that to be 1 mana? You let it do it just 1 time. And that seems totally reasonable.
If you can come up with a way to blink this thing, or reanimate it, you can get another javelin counter.
Or proliferate. Extra javelin counters.
All the javelin counters.
And proliferate plus Seedborn Muse, so every turn.
Every turn, all the javelin counters.
This is working really hard to make occasion Javelineers work.
Yep, we're going to make them real strong.
Melissa Benson's art is neat in that she got away, I don't know if it was really getting away, but she has her signature is like a symbol that she just puts into the art of so many of her works.
I feel like there's probably, maybe we can find out what it is before we publish this video. I think there is a term for that. J.R.R. Tolkien had something similar, which was the letters of his name kind of pushed together into more of a like an artsy symbol.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is an interesting name for that. Is it just monogram? That seems so mundane.
The Tolkien monogram, it appears.
So maybe that's the correct word. If there's a better word for that, maybe let us know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like this stylized monogram that she has incorporated into the art in that little column. I don't know what kind of creature is sitting on that, but it's cool looking.
Yeah,
if we can somehow make that even bigger.
Oh, it's a griffin, kind of. A gargoyle griffin.
Oh, I see it now. Okay. From a smaller size, I mistook the wings to be another head, and so I thought this was some kind of
it wasn't that
Cerberus kind of monster. But no, that's really cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah. All right, and too many rules for any flavor text on these.
Yeah,
photos.
there's too much going on here, and we have no flavor text.
Yep,
this next one is another Edward Beard Jr. And again, just so though this one he just has the one javelin, so that works a little bit better with the single javelin counter, because realistically, you're not going to be able to proliferate javelin counters to a point where you just have unlimited javelins.
Proliferated and exists for many years.
But yeah, this is a nice one, just showing a guy poised to hurl a javelin.
I know nothing about any sports really, but having watched the Olympics a few times, it feels like this probably is I think he studied a reference photo of what people do when they throw a javelin.
That seems likely.
That looks, almost, it looks so weird that it feels like, yes, that clearly is not having such that sharp inflection on your hand.
Probably I'm sure there's something. So like I used to do glass blowing when I was in college. And
okay.
Glass blowing involves it doesn't involve javelins, but it does involve these like 4 to 5 foot poles.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And you would think, there is something to be said for having to do some weird maneuvers to balance things like that. So that, like, as weird as this looks, posture-wise, that makes sense to me that you would have to compensate for the sheer like weight and length of this javelin.
Okay, I'm stuck on this. You were a glass blower for a while. Okay,
I was a glass blower.
We'll come back to that some other time. Maybe a different episode.
Yeah, different episode. It might come up again later.
And then the Scott Kirshner art.
This one is very different. So again, I don't know what the artists were told about the Acacian people.
Yeah.
But these guys have a very different vibe.
Yeah.
In terms of what they're wearing.
It's like a Harlequin mask, because it's got that eye. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because it kind of looks like. My initial thought was like hat or hair, which is an age-old Pokemon argument. But
yeah, we don't do that here.
But yeah, I'm not sure. I guess it's a hat.
I believe it is.
Maybe with some face paint.
I believe it's a mask.
Yeah, it's an interesting. We've got these like tentacle like protrusions.
Let's just glance at Scott Kirshner's other art, because I'm not really familiar with him too much. I know I've seen some of these other pieces, but do we see any?
He's got some really cool pieces. I really like his sliver art. His deadly insect is super cool. I might be a bit biased, but he did a couple of deadly insects.
Well, we see a few other figures just with hair, and it's not like this is the way Scott Kirshner always has hair or anything.
This is not like a signature look for him in terms of hair. Horseshoe crab.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But yeah, this seems like this is very intentional. All 3 characters in the frame have the same look. We're all shirtless, wearing like a towel around the waist.
Yeah.
And we've got this very interesting like tentacle mask.
It's so stylized and different than the others. Yeah.
And we have no flavor text to tell us who these guys are, so I can only imagine what would have gone through my head if I had opened this card and tried to tell myself a story about like who are these people. What are they
It's
about?
just so exotic,
It's
I guess,
very
compared
exotic
to the rest.
compared. I mean, the other 2 are just kind of like, they're soldiers.
Yeah. They feel
They're
somewhere
folks
in
with javelins.
between the Roman and the medieval army.
Like, I could see these guys coming out at Ren Fair, like, okay, we're gonna have the jousting is done, we're gonna have a javelin toss competition now. If these 3 walked in, I would have some questions.
Honestly, this is probably our kind of implicit bias toward European fashion, coming out, because we're just used. Right, I have the same natural inclination. That's what so much of our fantasy art is based on.
I would be very curious what these guys are based on, if there's something that these are alluding to.
If there was a reference,
it is such a unique look compared to the other stuff we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Like, I don't dislike it, it's just so different that I'm like, what's going on here?
It's neat. And then we do have these 3 comments that we've looked at, where you have the 4 infantry, the 4 scouts, and the 3 javelineers, and it does give you this picture of this combined forces.
And going back to the token sheet, the javelin token is clearly tied to this card.
I think that's
that's why that's the most evocative tie between the choices we have.
And that I initially just thought was a gesture mask, right? So that so
that makes more sense, like if that's the javelineer mask or something.
Right. Okay. All right, who do we have next up? I arranged things strangely in my own sheet here, but I think we should go to the combat medics next, because they're another set of soldiers. And they're another set of commons.
All right, so these are interesting. The first one, we're back to Edward Beard Jr., and we have this guy who appears to be, like, floating in the frame, which is quite cool. So this is a 3-drop O2 with an ability 1 and a white to prevent 1 damage to any player or creature. And the flavor text reads, although Acacia's combat medics borrowed much of their knowledge from other societies, their skills were their own. Sarpadian Empires, Volume 6.
Yeah. This pose and fashion, everything feels more like it's trying to make a Eastern mysticism reference. So it is interesting that not all the artists, it seems like there just wasn't much of a style guide. And people
maybe
were free
not.
to
they were free
draw
to
from whatever
incorporate
references
some
they want.
other sources into, like, what is this group of people supposed to look like?
Yeah.
So we have some interesting depictions. This is cool. I like this. I like the implication that even though its title is combat medic, which implies, like, okay, this is a doctor, or maybe that's just kind of shorthand for, like, this character has a healing function.
Yeah.
This feels very mystical. Like,
does.
this feels more like a cleric, like he's casting some kind of...
Yeah, as we looked at the others, there's a range between looking like they're practitioners of magic versus practitioners of medicine, as we
because there's one coming up here that's just coded as, like, a doctor who has, like, a little... If we want, let's just look at that one next.
The Anson Maddox.
The Anson Maddox one. So this guy is probably one of the coolest doctors I've ever seen. Or this gal, I'm not sure. But they're riding into the battle up top a beast of some kind. I don't know what that is. We haven't seen anything else
like this, but I love it.
I love it. It's got this cool... So they've got this, like, 3-point sort of substitute Red Cross thing that's branded on the uniform. That's
exactly what it feels like.
The little doctor's box, and then on the beast, too. So, like, this is the...
And she's wearing kind of like scrubs.
Yeah, she's got, like, scrubs, like knee-high boots, because she's here to do work. You know, you gotta have some tall boots if you're gonna ride this thing. She's got this, like, very, like, sort of a mix between scrubs and a lab coat, but also a cape.
Yes!
You know? And is just, like, very confidently riding atop this really cool monster that we've never seen before.
Yeah.
And this one says, without combat medics, Acacia would probably not have withstood the forces of chaos as long as it did.
I recall this one being one of my favorite cards.
Yeah, this is awesome.
It is just awesome. They took a function which is usually kind of flavorfully anticlimactic. Oh, you're just doing the healing.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that, but I love healing when I'm playing World of Warcraft. But
I like playing a cleric in D&D. Like...
Yeah.
But yeah, it's usually not portrayed as one of the flashier classes.
Yeah, but this
is awesome.
This character is selling it.
Like, I kind of want to build a D&D character now based on this character. Like, look at this beastie.
Yeah.
And it's got, like, 3 toes, too. I don't... Like, on the front, at least.
It's got... I don't know. On the back, it's, like, halfway between humanoid. It's kind of simian.
Yeah.
It is a neat beast.
It's super cool. I'd love to know...
I want more of these.
What it is, and I want more of them.
It's like a dog gorilla.
Yeah.
I definitely want more of those.
Yeah.
The Susan Van Camp. This is definitely in the category of this is a magic practitioner.
Yeah.
And also...
she's, like, laying hands on the wounded.
It also a glamour shot.
Also a glamour shot. We've got the, like, side profile looking off to the other direction.
Is Susan Van Camp also the artist from the Elf who is doing the same sort of thing?
Oh,
it was
let's
either
double
the
check.
Elvish Scout or the Elvish Hunter.
The Elvish Hunter? Sure is.
It is, yeah. That's so Susan Van Camp was just in that mode.
I mean, that was very much the aesthetic of 1994.
It was. It's very...
I know my aunt had a glamour shot, like, in that style.
Yeah. So I guess, at first glance, I think, okay, there are characters fighting in the background, but they are physically in the same space as these characters in the foreground. But maybe not. This is maybe a 3 different scenes kind of overlaid.
Yeah, that's kind of how I read it.
So like, what was happening is there was a fight, and now she's healing the person who got injured in the fight.
That's kind of how I read it, is that this is a little story that we're seeing here. It's not meant to be taken as this is all happening simultaneoantly.
But with the different hair colors...
I'm not sure about that.
It shouldn't be the same figure then, right? So maybe this is just combat medics representing...
Yeah,
I don't know.
That I'm not so sure about. I find it hard to believe that this is all taking place in the same area that, like, I mean, I don't know, maybe they're in the war zone actively and, like, there's a pair of guys over there fighting each other while she's trying to heal this dude.
Yeah. But yeah, her pose does not seem like I am trying to not get noticed.
She doesn't look like she's in a hurry. She's just like, I'm just doing my thing.
This feels like after the fight.
Yeah. So this flavor text says, we'd no sooner knock 'em back on their heels than that accursed Sawbones would show up and patch 'em back together again.
I like the fact that they called him Sawbones.
Yeah.
Which is ironic on one of the ones that shows
this is,
healing magic as
like,
opposed to...
Sawbones fits the Anson Maddox depiction much better than this gal who's doing more of a,
She does no sawing.
She's, like, aligning his chakras.
Yeah.
You know? Like, this is very mystical feel. There's, like, white... you know, magical implication nearby.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's curious that they use that. And this is a quote from Ivra Yursdalta.
Yes, we've heard from many times, who was the mercenary who kept changing sides and seemingly worked with the goblins and orcs. I mean, the name implies she was probably human, so that's interesting. But
yeah.
We definitely need a legendary version of her now, too.
Yeah.
In a commander set or something.
Yeah, if we get another, like, Commander Legends or some, I don't know, Modern Horizons, maybe we can shoehorn her in there somewhere.
That'd be entertaining.
Yeah.
And last, we have Liz Danforth's art, which is tied with Anson Maddox for my favorite in terms of... I mean, Anson Maddox just wins for being a cool thing.
Yeah.
But this seems
100%.
equally, like, good art. It's very textured. It draws your focus to the magic itself.
Yeah, this has really nice use of light.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm getting
And the
at.
drapery on the fabric is really, like, visually interesting to me.
Yeah, it really is. You feel that
I guess that's
texture.
kind of what you mean about the texture.
Yeah,
like,
it gives me a
really...
sense memory.
Yeah.
Like, I know things that feel like that.
Yeah, so this one says, time enough to become a medic once you're hurt too badly to fight. For now, Acacia needs your strength more than your compassion.
Lydia Winforth, Mayor of Trocaire. I believe we'll see Trocaire as one of the lands we look at the end of this, which, don't let me forget, we forgot to talk about the Greenlands last time, so we had to take a look at those.
We'll need to take a little aside and journey through that.
Yeah, but I believe Trocaire was the last human settlement, or maybe it was just one of the major human settlements to fall.
Yeah, so this kind of makes it sound like if you get hurt too badly to fight on the front lines, maybe you get shifted into a medic role.
Yeah. The mechanical function of this card, I think, is pretty unfortunate, because we've talked before about how the original boon cycle, including, like, Dark Ritual and what, I always forget, I get confused between the blue one that's part of the Power 9.
Oh, yeah.
Ancestral, is it?
I think it's Recall, or...
Visions is the...
That's like the fixed
Recall's
version.
the original. Yeah, so Recall is the Power 9 one. So the draw 3 cards being the thing you get to do 3 of for the 1 mana, whereas Healing Salve is on the opposite. Salve? It is on the opposite end of that spectrum, where it is just painfully underwhelming to prevent 3 damage for 1 white. And
I mean, I think there has been, you know... Each color has their own things that they're best at. And historically, there has always been kind of an imbalance in terms of what the colors can do at the common and uncommon levels. I think a lot of times, like, blue's association with drawing cards is just so much stronger than, you know, it's like, oh, you can prevent 3 damage or, like,
but I mean,
gain 3 life. You're like, cool.
But we knew already, I think at this point, very early on, it became apparent that Healing Salve wasn't really cutting it.
Yeah.
It was not a competitive card. But then they take that, knowing that 1 white for that was not good enough. I mean, they should have known that. Maybe they just didn't. But then you have to invest 5 mana to you get a 0/2 that sticks around and can block, maybe?
Yeah.
But it
like,
can never attack.
It's just not enough.
But every time you want to prevent 1 additional damage, it costs 2 mana. It's so expensive. If this had been
pricey.
1 mana and, like, 1 free activation for turn, I still don't know if it'd be playable.
Yeah.
And that's kind of tragic, because this Anson Maddox art deserves better.
It really does. I'm so into this.
Yeah. But I'm getting sidetracked onto what we're not supposed to focus on,
Yes.
which is it good enough?
Yeah.
Is it flavorful? Which, yeah, it is pretty flavorful that you have healers, kind of comparable to the goblin chirurgians. I will never say that. Yes, thank you. Those are the medics who regenerate things by consuming other things. But.
I think in a way, mechanics aside, because that's not what we're here to talk about, flavor-wise, I think it works that, we know that ultimately the occasions are not triumphant.
Yeah.
So, it's just not enough.
It takes so much resources to heal and to prevent the damage, and the damage
enough.
just keeps coming.
Yeah.
That is tragic and makes sense. All right. I think we should probably go through the rest of the soldiers and then come back to the rest of the commons, which are not soldiers.
Yeah.
Just because the creature type is such a big theme for this set. So what's our first non-common soldier? I think it is the lieutenant. Yeah. And this is, I think, the only card that does specifically call out soldier. Listed as a rare. So it's an uncommon one. One on each sheet of uncommons. So for 2 and a white, you get a 1/2. And I have to contrast it with the lords that they printed, in alpha for the Goblin King and all that, where you get +1/+1 to the team static for a 3-mana creature. Wait, was Merfolk, the Lord of Atlantis, was that even a 3-mana? Was it 2 blue? Yeah, it's just 2 blue. So
that's just a blanket effect.
Yeah.
This way you have to pay per soldier. Its target soldier gets 1/0
per turn.
Till end of turn.
So again, I'm shifting into does this stand up power-wise, and we shouldn't do that. It does. Again, it attributes that, you can do this thing with enough resources. We didn't have enough resources to live.
Yeah.
But...
Because in theory, if you had enough resources, you could combine this ability with some of the other stuff, like giving your soldier first strike and banding and all these things, but that would just be so resource intensive that realistically that's not going to happen.
But the dream it offers is really cool.
Yeah.
It does say exactly that. You play some creatures that can give first strike or give it to themselves, so either scouts or the infantry. You put them in a big band if you want, and you pump it as large as it needs to be with the lieutenant, who is acting as a force multiplier for other soldiers. And and that's how you can win combats, and that's cool. That is a cool flavor. To become an officer, an Acacian soldier had to pass a series of tests. These evaluated not only fighting and leadership skills, but also integrity, honor, and moral strength. Well, that's pure flavor. That doesn't say anything mechanically. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, so they want you to be the best of the best to occupy this position.
Integrity, honor, and moral strength. That does feel just kind of fleshing out the white color pie and what it's supposed to mean flavor-wise. On to the next.
Yeah. What's our next one up here?
Here we have the Acacian Phalanx. I still don't know if it's Acacian or Icacian. I keep saying it in alternating ways. It's an uncommon in Scryfall, so it's an uncommon 3, so the equivalent of a true uncommon today.
Yeah, so this one bans.
It sure does.
It's a 5-drop, 2/4. Even after the wall was breached in half a dozen places, the phalanxes fought on, standing solidly against the onrushing raiders. Disciplined and dedicated, they held their ranks to the end, even in the face of tremendous losses.
Yeah.
And we have a variety of different facial expressions in this Kaya Folio art. Is it Kaya or Kaja? We've had this conversation.
Kaya.
It's Kaya, okay. We've got this one on the far left who is just hyped.
She's into this.
Are so into this.
She's gonna stab some orcs.
She is gonna stab so many orcs.
And look at her shield. She's already stabbed.
Yeah, she's got little
20
tally
or so.
marks on there, so she's got
22?
the numbers to prove it.
Wow, yeah.
And then we've got the next one over. Looks kind of irritated to be here, or maybe they're mad that they're not in the front.
I think that's the vibe.
Maybe they're mad that they're behind her. They don't have as many orc stabbings under their belt. And then the one next to her, she doesn't have anything on her shield, but she just looks kind of over this.
I don't know. I think she might be into the one who's...
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was kind of reading it more like, oh my god.
I don't know. I'm kind of seeing it in two ways. But
yeah,
you're right. I don't know.
She looks like she doesn't look as mad as the one behind her, but
Definitely
she does have kind of a, there's a bit of an air of disdain there, just like...
Yeah. Yeah, I can see it either way.
Like, you're so much. Like, you're just and then the one next to her is just kind of zoned out, and
Yeah.
I don't know what they're thinking.
Yeah, it is an interesting contrast with the serious tone of the rest of this. And that is just true of the Folio's art. They're generally kind of wacky, kind of silly, kind of comic style.
A lot of them are.
Yeah, which is a weird fit on this one because it feels like this.
Yeah.
Well, it's a weird fit with this flavor text primarily.
Yeah.
If this is the true army, before we've seen just the pieces of the armies that you can assemble together, it's a phalanx.
Yeah.
So it's a big assembled group who form a shield wall, and I guess the idea is then you combine this with any number of other things and you attack, and this has a big butt. It's a 4 toughness, which is just about the biggest thing we see here, except
that's pretty tough.
Except for the enormous one-off creatures like an orb.
Again, I think it's really fun that we have all this flavor on the card, which I love. I love flavor text. But, like, God's help you if you don't know what bands mean.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. And it's interesting it says bands. I thought they said banding on the original, like, I'm going to look up Vanilla Shiro.
Yeah, let's take a look at that, how that's changed.
Vanillish, not Vanillish. Banding! Well, that's not the print that first came out.
Yeah, let's look at the initial...
Yeah. We're looking at the...
bands.
Oh,
so
okay.
This must have been a change to banding.
That's interesting. Yeah, you can see in... Unlimited, it's still bands. In Revised, it's still bands. Wow, all the way 5th edition, it looks like, is when they changed it to banding. The things I did not recall. Make sure that's what we're looking at. No, that's his 4th? Okay. Well, what's this one then? Is this Summer Magic?
Maybe.
Yep, okay. So
that is, like... We'll probably have to cut it, but like I just love the flavor text on Banalish Hero.
Yeah.
About Benalia has a complex caste system that changes with the lunar year. But no matter what the season, the only caste that cannot be attained by either heredity or money is that of the hero.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Have they? I know we've visited Benalia a few times recently, but I don't recall hearing about that.
Yeah.
But
maybe that's something they haven't revisited.
Pity. So yeah, there's the Acacian Phalanx. And are there any other soldier? There's one other soldier outside of the Order of Leapbow. We'll get there, or Lightbow. I think I segment them slightly a little bit. But the Acacian Skirmishers is our last uncommon here. And they are an uncommon 1. So the rarest of the Fallen Empire's cards.
So rare.
You know what it's got, though? It's got bands.
It's got bands.
And First Strike. Oh! I know I've read this before, but it's as if I'm reading it for the first time. That's the ADHD experience. You get to keep having new experiences, even though you've had them before. All creatures that band with skirmishers to attack gain First Strike until end of turn. That's really cool.
That's really quite good. So that really helps with the 4-drop 1/1 at first glance. Like, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, I mean... But
it does some cool things.
Power creep... definitely has been a thing over the years, and early creatures just were worse.
I mean, even comparatively, because earlier on, we had 1/1 creatures for 1, and now you open this guy and you're like, I gotta pay 4.
Yeah, and like the phalanx that were just it was 5 for a 2/4. Okay, so yeah, it is.
But yes. Playing 4 for a 1/1 sounds terrible, but this one does some really cool things.
But I think the dream here is this is your 4-drop, and then the phalanx is your 5-drop, and then. I know it's slow. We're not talking about power. The dream is then you attack with them together, and you have this enormous first striking band. And that is really cool. Yeah, what is your opponent going to do?
Yeah, this one says skirmishers engaged raiders before they could reach the towns. Although these units typically suffered huge losses, they never lacked volunteers. So that kind of ties in with the bands, I guess. Is that, like, again, it's the
I think that ties in with them giving each other first strike or giving the other things. Because if you are with this group, they are so good, they're going to make you good too, and you're going to be safe, and you're going to ambush all your enemies.
Yeah.
They look like they're in a wintry situation.
Yeah.
And we don't really see that kind of weather in most of the art in this set.
Yeah, we typically don't, even though, like, part of what's going on in Fallen Empires is we're talking about the climate change and, like, the way the world is changing. So maybe this is meant to show, like, over time as the conflict, because what we've talked about is, like, these were the last to fall, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they're hanging on a bit longer than some of the other factions have.
Yeah. Let's just go ahead and look at the next one we see on Skyfall here, which is the Acacian Town.
That is really pretty. This
It is.
one, again, kind of has a wintry feel to it, and I think that is almost entirely because of the sky.
Yeah, that's true.
Because there's really nothing else around. There's no snow, there's no, trees without leaves, there's nothing else that really makes me feel like, oh, this takes place during the winter.
Yeah.
But I think it's just that very dark sky. But this is really pretty. Like, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know, like, it kind of makes me want to go home and play Skyrim after this.
Yeah, there's something about the bridge style too.
I think there's
and
that,
yeah, it does look like is it Whiterun the first?
Yeah, it's like, this makes me want to just go walk around in Whiterun for a while.
It sure does.
Yeah, this is a 6-drop sorcery.
Yeah.
That puts 4 citizen tokens into play, and these are to be treated as 1/1 white creatures.
And I bet they gave us some tokens over on the token
sure hope
sheets.
so.
Yeah. Where is the
How else am I to know what they look
Citizen.
like? There they are.
It's hard to make the detail out here. It looks
like a person sitting on like a sack of flour.
Yeah, and beside
then
like
they
a
have,
milk
big
barrel.
milk container.
Yeah, that's interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
But they have this stick thing. It looks almost like they're a bard with an oud or something.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
That's cool.
Yeah. That is a cool effect. I don't think we had anything at that time that could make that many tokens all
Yeah.
at once. Like the premier token maker in alpha was the Hive. You can make 1 wasp token per turn for 5 mana. and there are a few other token makers. They make whether the snake extruder or whatever it's called. Something really cool like that.
There's
in Legends.
Is it the
And those things
There's
are
a snake basket. There's another one there's a couple things that make snakes. I've looked into this for reasons.
of course. Serpent
generator.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite arts.
And that's a 6-drop that you spend 4.
And then you pay more to get one.
You get
snake.
10 mana for your first snake.
Yeah.
But so 4 tokens for 6 mana.
That's a pretty good exchange rate. Yeah.
Yeah, and it does acknowledge that this is a one-shot deal, whereas those other things are, once again, the dream that is promised, and young me is not thinking about, that's a lot of mana. Had no concept of that.
You're like, if I sit here and no one messes with me indefinitely, do you know how many snakes I'm gonna make?
Yeah, but if you have an anthem effect, which they had those in alpha, Crusade was there. Acacian Town, suddenly that's 8/8 of power tokens. That's actually a good deal,
And I mean,
even
if
by like
you
modern standards.
just like got blown out, all your creatures died, you're on 6 mana, you can just drop this and like, oh, I've rebuilt my whole board.
Yeah. That is cool. And we have all these things that band. And banding plays well, at least on defense, where you only have to have one bander to make the band. That plays great with these.
So now you've got 4 new bodies that you can include in that band.
Yeah.
The flavor text on this one says, Acacia's once peaceful towns faced increasing attacks from orcs and goblins as the climate cooled. By the time the empire fell, they were little more than armed camps.
Yeah.
So I'm right, it is winter.
You're right. Yeah. And it's abandoned, though. It makes you all these citizens. There are no people in this picture, and that's kind of haunting.
That is kind of haunting. You have a single horse depicted and no one else.
Yeah. I do like that. Is that all of the Acacians? No, not really.
There's a few more.
We're past the soldiers.
Yeah.
So looking at the set as being about creature types, that really was the whole faction.
Yeah.
And the town doesn't make them either. It makes citizen tokens.
Yeah.
So they're not good in that sense. But there are a few other white creatures that definitely feel like part of the main faction rather than the feral light branch. And the Acacian money changer is, maybe that's the only one, but it's certainly one of them. It's a townsfolk. I think, what has it turned into now? Why am I clicking on
there's a few types that have been, what's the word? Like, they've been retired.
Yep, townsfolk is among them, and now this is merely a human.
Yep.
But there are 3 arts for this one. And this is another 0 too.
This one only costs 1, though. This one, Money Changer deals 3 damage to you when summoned. Put 3 credit counters on Money Changer at that time. During your upkeep, put 1 credit counter on Money Changer. Then you can pay 0, or in modern times, this would just say sacrifice Money Changer to gain 1 life for each credit counter on it. Use this ability only during your upkeep.
Yeah. This is, I think, a terrible thing to actually do, but the flavor is amazing.
It is.
It says you can invest your life.
You can invest your life. Invest your resources.
Strangely, I don't think they've ever revisited this mechanic.
This is curious.
Yeah.
We've got 3 different art depictions.
Very different arts. None of them are very flattering.
No, the money changer, I think, is not meant to be a sympathetic character.
Yeah.
This first one is Drew Tucker, and it's just very dark.
Yeah.
He's kind of, this is one of, again, he's kind of got that impressionistic style going on here, so you can see a figure.
Yeah.
I can't really make out much else about what's going on here.
It feels very Victorian. It feels like this is a hazy look at Scrooge's office from the Muppets Christmas Carol.
I mean, the vibe that I get from this is like, this guy is probably my landlord, and I'm like going...
The perspective where we're looking at him, and he is in the position of power really does communicate.
Like, I'm going to him, like, dying of consumption and trying to let him know that, like, I'm not going to be able to make rent. Can you just give me, like, one more week? And he's like, no.
Yeah.
You can get out.
Yep. And then what else we have? Edward Beard Jr. does this one.
Yeah, again, this guy does not look like a pleasant fellow.
No, I don't. I reckon... It feels like kind of generic medieval clothes, but it's weird stuff. I don't recognize this hat style or anything. It's strange. And then the Melissa Benson one.
So this one, you can see her little monogram back there hidden in the corner again. This one I think is probably the most interesting in terms of like all of the different symbols that we have to kind of look at here.
Yeah.
So you have this guy, the bars on the window, I think, are telling.
Oh, yeah.
That's something that we haven't really seen we haven't seen a lot of interiors, I guess, but to me that feels very intentional, is that he's trying to keep people out.
Yep.
He's worried. He's got this massive chest of something that he's sort of like guarding with his body.
Yeah.
And then despite what we've generally seen, most of the people that we've seen depicted so far, if you're not a soldier, you're kind of just wearing a tunic or some kind of pretty nondescript garb. This guy is dressed in this lavish, like, fur-lined cloak. He's got...
Four purses?
He's got more purses than he can hang on his belt.
Yeah, he's carrying one and he has 3 on the belt. Yeah, this is...
And, I mean, he's very well fed, so like, he's not missing meals. He doesn't seem concerned about anything that's going on in the world.
And he's angry. Look at his expression.
Look at everything he has, and he's still just like, ugh.
Yeah.
And we know that, like, contextually what's happening in the world that he lives in is, like, we're at odds with the orcs and goblins. We've got people that are more focused on the ebon hand than they are about the actual threat at our door, and he's just like, ugh, I can't carry all my gold. So I think this one is very interesting. The Edward Beard Jr. one has kind of a similar vibe, but more just like, he's just hyper focused on what's in front of him.
Yeah.
Which again kind of feels like I get an obliviousness from this character, that he's just more concerned about his own investments and wealth than he is about like the bigger picture or anything that's going on in the world he lives in.
They're just all so Scrooge. It's all that mode.
It's very Scrooge coded.
That is so different than pretty much any other things we see in Magic. I mean, we see black cards. Part of the Black Color Pie's flavor is that it is selfish and ambitious. And so you do see Liliana kind of embodies that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more attractive in its portrayal.
Yes. Yes. I think white greed in this game is portrayed as very unflattering. I think a lot of times in the game, like when you have black-aligned characters that are shown as being greedy and selfish, it's portrayed in a more attractive way.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of the original art for Land Tax too, which has the like...
Yeah.
The
exactly the same.
Yeah, which is very much
thing.
the same kind of vibe. As the Acacian money changer. So just interesting
that
flavor
one
perspective.
is like literally got a mustache like a Victorian melodrama, right?
I don't know if it's intentional in this way, but like selfishness is kind of coded into the black archetype of magic.
Yes.
Like, that's part of, ambition at any cost. Like, it's expected. And white is supposed to be about community and all of us. So, like, this is kind of a character, even though they're white aligned, they're kind of going against that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it seems like the artists here were just absolutely in agreement on what that meant.
They were like, Scrooge, got
yeah,
it.
Yeah. Okay. And really off topic, but I've never looked this closely at an enlarged picture of the Lantax. What is his hat made of? It's blue and furry.
It's blue and furry.
It's Cookie Monster.
Yeah, he skinned Cookie Monster to make that
Okay.
hat.
Moving on. I didn't mean to get that dark. Okay, I think that's all of the clearly Icatian part of the, well, except for the Order of Lightbur, and they're portrayed sort of as their own separate. I don't know. Are they basically, because they're not the military of the Icatians?
Yeah, what are they about? Do we know what they're about?
I think they're crusaders.
Okay.
Well, yeah, we do know what they're about. So let's have a look at this first flavor text on this Brian Wackwitz art.
Followers of Turok regarded all other religions equally, with open contempt. Not so the followers of Lightbur, who made it their mission to eradicate the Order of the Ebon Hand. Okay.
Right. And another interesting thing we've noticed in previous colors, there is one color hoser in each color for each of the two enemy colors.
Yeah.
So like there was the Thelon's Curse and Chant were the anti-black and anti-blue cards in green. Those are usually an uncommon, but in black and white, you have these symmetrical Order of Lightbur and Order of the Ebon Hands, who are a common, who have the opposite color. So
yeah, this one has protection from black. You can pay 2 white to give it 1/0 till end of turn, and you can pay 1 white to give it first strike until end of turn.
And not to leap too much into the last volume of this, but the Order of the Ebon Hand is portrayed basically as a cult. An evil religion, and so the Order of Lightbur are clearly just their antithesis out there, spreading the light and trying to eradicate them, as explained here.
I'm curious what else they're about besides eradicating the Ebon Hand. Like, do they have anything else going on in their doctrine, or is that their whole thing?
I think there's more to it. But I think that's what this feels like, is that there is a standing military. That's what most of these cards have been. But then we have like the special forces here. They are very dedicated to this one specific. And this is the only time we see people who are portrayed as knights.
Yeah.
Like we think
these
about
are very
them.
like classical.
They have full armor and they are riding horses and they have lances, essentially.
And their horses have that special horse armor that knights often use. Well, some of them do.
Yeah. So I guess let's go through the art and flavor text of each of these, and then we'll talk about the mechanics, since we've already started on that. Very unusual that there are two by the same artist.
Yes. I like that they are, if we put them side by side, which we can do momentarily, they're facing each other.
Yeah. I've always thought these were a beautiful pair.
They're very pretty.
And then the flavor text on the other one is, "The powers of the corrupt will fade before the fury of the pure," attributed to Bethan Lightbur, the Way. So presumably that's their holy book and the founder of their order, their religion. And then the other one is Randy Asplin Faith. And what's the flavor text on that one?
Trained to battle the followers of Turok, the Order of Lightbur was not as successful as later conflicts with Orcish and Goblin Raiders. Well, they lacked that, fanatical fire.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the basis of their group.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great mechanical tie-in with this. They have protection from black.
Yeah, they're pro-black.
Of course, that's not useful against orcs.
Of course they did great against the Ebon Hand. Like, what are we supposed to do against these red creatures?
Yeah. And these just absolute stereotypical Ren Fair knights.
Yeah, very, very Renaissance fair. They're quite cool. I like the other two better just because we get like a single figure, I think.
Yeah.
This one's fine, but I just personally prefer the other two.
I think these are some of the standout art from the set. Yeah. They are just they're really
just
beautiful.
Really nice to look at.
They are. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
They are like what is that? There's a real well-known classical piece of it's just a knight and like the maiden and the knight or something.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I don't know the artist's name,
but that has that feel to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, this almost has more of a classical art style, but it doesn't capture that feel.
Yeah.
This is just a chaotic battle scene, seemingly of the Order fighting amongst themselves. None of those look like the Order of the Ebon Hand, but maybe they're, again, there's no style guide. There doesn't seem to have been a style guide passed out to the artist, so maybe the ones on the left are supposed to be the Ebon Hand, and the ones who are being not speared through the chest are the Order of Lightbearer.
Yeah. Something really cool, too, that I hadn't really thought about is that, like, most of the depictions we've seen in this set, like they have a female knight depicted on one of these arts, and like that's really cool. In 1994 that we're getting that.
It is pretty...
And she's not wearing like bikini armor. She has a real suit of armor.
I had the same thought.
Like, that's cool.
Yeah, like a lot of the female... There are a couple of female depictions, because we looked at that elf that I was describing as fan service.
Yes, there are... Like, it's not...
It's the exception,
it's there,
though. It's not the
rule.
rule.
Yeah, it's not, like, all over the place, and then we get this one, or like the Benalish hero. Like, we get some pretty cool depictions of female figures doing cool things. Like, that's neat.
Yeah, it is. And so then mechanically, it's very strange to me that we've been talking about and seemingly going off topic and saying all these things are underpowered because they cost so much. This thing is full of ways to pump mana, and it requires double white, unlike most of these other cards. And yet, this is one of the few cards that was tournament competitive for a while after this. And I guess just the threat of activation of these things is really powerful. I don't know what degree the protection was
I guess,
part of that.
I guess it depends on the meta, like... If you are, like, I don't know what the percentage of black was in the meta at the time. Like, how strong is pro-black?
I'm gonna grab one of these books that has...
we can answer this question to some degree.
Yeah. Let's see if this... I have a couple of these books that I had accumulated from Half Price over the years. It looks... What does that mean? This is actually sold to half price in 2001, or is that 2012?
That's when it was stickered. So that's probably that should be 2001.
Oh wow!
That would be a 12 if they were. It would be 1212 if they were using conventional pricing.
Okay, so
I used to work there. So.
Yeah. So
I'm an expert.
I just assumed Julie knows everything about everything.
Just former glassblower, former half-price books bookseller.
All right, and so
Editor's note: while they fumble around, failing to find what they're looking for, you'll find a full playset of 4 Order of Lightbearer in this deck from Pro Tour Chicago in 1997. Its pilot was none other than Kyle Rose, who you might know today by his streaming handle, The Ham. He's a real big dude.
And like we've talked about, again, not to get too deep in the weeds on mechanics, but given that for the most part, we don't see a lot of super powerful creatures at this era in Magic, being able to give your 2/1 first strike is probably pretty good, especially when you can combine it with all these other critters that have various ways to pump their power and toughness.
Yeah, Savannah Lions was a rare, and it was a really good rare at the time. It was a key part of the white weenie deck. Just a 2/1 for 1 white. That was a big deal. So this is cited in this famous Cards in Magic Fallen Empires, Order of the Ebon Hand and Order of Lightbearer, offering 3 different special abilities for only black, black, or white, white. They are often referred to as Pump Knights because of their similarity to the already strong Black Knight and White Knight. I don't know if anyone actually called them that, but it's funny.
Maybe they only this, they're like, what are we going to call these guys?
Yeah. I don't know if these are the special forces of this civilization and they are guided by some divine providence, then it does seem appropriate. You can pump them full of mana and make them infinitely powerful.
Just funnel in all... I mean, this doesn't have the restriction that you can only do this once once per turn, like a lot of modern cards do. So, like, in theory, if you have unlimited white mana, you can make this thing so big and then first strike.
Yep. Yeah.
That would be the dream.
And honestly, I guess that does kind of explain it, because that's that threat of activation. Yeah, you can block this, and they can just spend their turn to kill your creature and not spend any cards. So all right. And if you don't, well, they just can keep casting their spells.
Yeah.
So the other half of white, then we've talked about the occasions pretty thoroughly, and I'm still not sure which faction to associate Order of Lightbearer with, but it's definitely time to move on to the Feralite sect. But do we want to talk about those first, or do we want to talk about our side topic for today, which is a couple more of the artifacts? Or do you want to say those to the end?
We'll save those till the end.
All right. So there aren't that many Ferals cards. As I asserted, this is pretty lopsided. There are so many Ications that there's one common Feralite card and 2 uncommons. And the common is Feral's Zealot, which I think says a tremendous amount by calling them a Zealot. No one ever says Zealot with a positive connotation.
No, that's typically not something that has a positive association. And if you look at Feral's Zealot, this first one is illustrated by Melissa Benson. This is a real interesting critter.
Yeah.
So it costs 3, it's a 2/2, and if it attacks and isn't blocked, you can choose to have it deal 3 damage to a target creature. If you do so, it deals no damage to opponent this turn. So if it would have dealt combat damage, you can reassign that to a creature. This critter is outfitted in knives.
Yeah.
So many knives.
I believe this mechanic is informally called an assassin mechanic now, I think.
Oh, really? I mean, that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
It's probably only a matter of time until they actually keyword
Give
that.
it some kind of keyword.
But that's certainly a thing we see in the modern day. If this would deal combat damage,
this happens
either you get
instead.
this additional effect or you get it instead. Usually it's in addition nowadays, but when we get to black, we'll see a lot more effects like this. So it's interesting that Feral's Zealots, who are the anti-black faction, are kind of cribbing those cards' abilities.
Yeah, it is. And, like, this guy is kind of black creature coded. Like, this doesn't look like a white creature.
Yeah.
You know?
It's aggressive
He's
mean and
we've also
violent.
got, like, a lot of the red spiky colors and accoutrement kind of make me think of, like, the Razorkin that we've seen recently in Duskmourn.
It's kind of Rakdos.
A little bit of Rakdos vibes going on here. But most people, I think, like, they probably don't call themselves zealots. I think this is implied that, they're being talked about.
Yeah, I think so.
So the next one is the Richard Kane Ferguson illustration, and this is very ominous looking. A little bit less impressionistic, but there's still some of that. Like, it's a little more defined.
I definitely put it in that camp.
It's not quite as impressionistic as some of his stuff.
I absolutely assumed this was a zombie the first time I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very zombie-like. It's kind of a lich looking fella. It says, Feral and his followers became a formidable band of vigilantes, battling Ications and followers of Turok.
Yeah, so that is the most adversarial thing we've seen about them. I had forgotten that. So that does pit them truly against the rest of the Icacian soldiers and everything.
And if we go back to the first one, I didn't read the flavor text for that. It says, after the fall of Trocaire, Feral and his followers formally broke their ties with the rest of Acacia.
All right, so that implies for most of the civilizations, well, so for the most of this story, of this set, they were still there, but they were, I guess, getting more and more tense.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because when we, like you've said before, we've looked at a couple of different colors where we had 2 civilizations at odds. And I think this is the first time we've really seen where there's one group of people, humans, that have, like, there's, a couple of distinct factions that are ideologically at odds with each other.
Yeah. In a sense, this set is really symmetrical in that each color has the 2 factions, but really every single faction is done in a different way. Like in red, the orcs and goblins are a conglomeration of 2 factions. Here in white, the oppositional faction is so small and really part of the same group. And it's just neat that they have those different takes on it. And then the last one, this looks like Aleister Crowley's famous photo.
It does. Yeah, this last one is very ominous looking. He's wearing, like, a black robe. He has impaled skulls behind him.
These are all absolutely should have been a black card contenders.
Yeah, like, these guys do not look like a typical white creature.
Yeah.
So this one says, Feral, a former priest, believed Acacia was far too complacent toward the Order of the Ebon Hand.
It feels like we should have read that one first.
Yeah.
But, just because that does set the scene the best. So this is just a member of the clergy?
Yeah, I guess this guy is a former clergyman.
Yeah, I probably only former because he broke off and formed his faction.
It sounds like his views are kind of at odds with the rest of his society.
Yeah. So
yeah, very ominous looking. Like I could believe. So like the Order of Lightbur, they kind of feel like there's probably some religious fanaticism there.
Yeah.
But these guys,
Yeah.
like these guys feel malicious in a pretty open way
Yeah.
that the Lightbur Order does not.
Yeah. It's really unusual to see the rebels portrayed as the negative bad guys. I mean,
Yeah.
Star Wars is the most classic
Yeah.
example of when people say, oh yeah, the rebels, that's
Yeah.
what I go to. Rebels are always the good guys. It's
Yeah,
always the
these-
heroic underdogs, but not
These
here.
guys are not portrayed as heroes.
Yeah.
I'm sure they think they're heroes,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like in the grander scheme,
Yeah, it's just so unusual to see magic
Yeah.
cards framed that way. And
It
that's kind of what I
is.
was trying to get at with talking about the selfish and ambitious
Yeah.
black cards. Usually whatever the card is, it's presented as something that you would want to
Yeah.
cast and be allied with.
yeah.
But these just aren't. These are just bad guys. That's the way they are portrayed.
Yeah, one of they're bad guys in the sense that like they very much look and are coded as villains.
Yeah.
Like they're those video game characters that you run into and you're like, "Oh, this guy is going to betray the party."
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to ally myself with Farrell's zealot. Like he's
Yeah.
100% going to stab me in the back the first chance he gets.
Yeah.
You know, like he doesn't
Yeah.
have that like these guys don't have the cool villain aspect where you're like, okay, like I know you're a villain, but maybe if we become really good friends.
Oh, that's just you and your Yawgmoth thing talking. Farrell's Mantle. So it's an enchantment. It's an aura now, but definitely, from the name, part of this sect. And it gives the enchanted creature, if target creature attacks and is not blocked, it may deal X+2 damage to another target creature. So basically the same ability as the Zealot, where X is the power of the creature it enchants. So it's as if the Zealot was a 1/1 and you give it the same ability.
Okay.
And then if it does so, it deals no damage to the opponent this turn. So it really just gives that ability to something else.
Okay, yeah, and this is cool. Like this character is just like clearly wrapped up in what I presume to be Farrell's mantle.
Yeah. I like this as a design. It's a pity equipment didn't exist because it definitely wants
It
to
would
be
be an
equipment.
equipment, yeah.
Yeah. And is that Farrell? Is that what we're thinking?
I don't know. I maybe, or he's taken on the mantle.
The mantle of leadership.
Yeah.
I only learned recently that that's what a mantle is. It's basically like a cloak, or usually
Yeah.
it's shorter than that. It's just a shoulder
Yeah, it's like a
mini cloak or something.
yeah.
I guess it can be different sizes.
I mean, I think the shorthand is it's like a sheet that you wrap around
Yeah.
yourself, basically.
The last Farrell's card is the Feralite Priest. Is this an uncommon 1 or 3? I keep asking that question. This is just an uncommon 3.
Okay.
But very interesting, and foreshadowing because we haven't gotten here yet, but this has the same ability as one of the common Ebon Hand creatures.
Oh, interesting.
So once again, all of the Farrell's creatures mimicking things
Yeah.
that the black cards from the same set are doing. But what it does is it filters any color of mana into white mana, whereas obviously the Ebon Hand ones are doing filtering into black. But if you overload this little converter, it gets fried and dies. If you do it more than 3,
Okay.
no,
Oh, yeah,
if
we
more than 3, so you can do it up to 3
You
times.
can't do this forever.
Yeah. And it's a 1/3 for 1 white, so heavily into white. And why would you want to do that? The only reason I can think is to power your Order of Lightbur. So that does tie it mechanically to the Order of Lightbur, which that's fitting.
Yeah.
If they are really fixated on the religious fanaticism and being anti-Ebon Hand, well, yeah, that allies with the special forces who are anti-Ebon Hand.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
So this one is illustrated by Phil Folio, and it says, although their methods were often brutal, Farrell's followers believed in the preservation of justice and virtue.
Yeah. Some more interesting flavor text where this
Yeah.
is really negatively framed for us, the audience. This
yeah.
is the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah.
This is
They think they're doing the right
this
thing.
is the witch hunts in
Yeah.
in New England.
Yeah, they think what they're doing is perfectly fine.
It's bizarre to see Phil Folio art on something so serious because, as I have asserted over and will continue to assert, like both Phil and Kaya Folio's art tends to be just kind of silly. Not always,
look
but
at
like
the persecuted monster in
know.
front of him.
Like, what's
Who's
happening?
like pleading for
Yeah.
mercy.
yeah, and it looks like it's being not excommunicate, exercise. It looks like it's being harmed.
It's being harmed,
But that's not at all what the flavor, like what the mechanics of this card do. So I don't know what's going on there, but it does feel like inconsistent with these people are all about destroying the evil unbelievers of the Ebon Hand, and I can believe that's an Ebon Hand thing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is just judging from like the way the Fairlight Priest is drawn, and who I presume to be one of the members of the Ebon Hand.
Yeah.
This reads as kind of like old-time war propaganda, or like they've drawn him in kind of a caricature style, while the priest looks fairly humanoid and normal. You know, the Ebon Hand creature is drawn like almost inhuman. Yeah. And more monstrous.
And it seems like a pretty direct reference. I'll go ahead and break our not showing cards from later in the series rule, which isn't an actual rule. It's just been something I've been doing.
It's an unspoken rule.
But the is it the initiates? Yeah. So there's this one initiates of the Ebon Hand where it's a bunch of green-skinned. I don't know what they are. It's a mishmash of different kind of creature types looking, but it looks fairly similar to what Filifolio has depicted here. Yeah. And that's neat. But then I think that brings us to the last creature. Have we done Acacian Priest?
No.
Oh.
We haven't looked at the Acacian Priest.
Big mistake on my part, because this is not seemingly part of Farrell's group, though it is a cleric instead of a soldier. I don't know. It says Acacian, which makes me think it's intended to be part of the main group, but maybe we should acknowledge that they are forming a rift in this existing society, so maybe this character could go either way. Yeah. Summon Cleric, it's a 1/1 for 1. And for 1 white, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So this is the better version of what the Acacian Lieutenant was doing. It costs less, though, to do the Acacian Lieutenant's ability. But the priest can bestow its boon on any creature, not just a soldier.
Yeah, this one says, may you be strong and valiant to defeat the enemies of the pure. Lightbur's Prayer.
Yep, and that feels just kind of generic priest stuff. Yeah. And that's fine. It's just another piece of this picture. Yeah. And so that does take us to probably the most interesting white card, and certainly the card that I was infatuated with when the set was new, and I think was probably the most valuable card at a whole like $4 or something, at least in my play group of 8th graders, you know. The Hand of Justice.
This is so interesting.
It is.
So we kind of talked a little bit about the green people depicted on that other card. So yeah, we have this character, this very imposing character, who is quite green.
I had not actually ever noticed that.
Yeah?
Yeah,
that was the first thing I noticed.
I think that's just the lighting.
Maybe it's just the lighting. Maybe he's not meant to be green.
I don't think he is. It's an avatar. It's not a human. And
what is his updated typing? Is he still an avatar?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And look at the flavor text. The Hand of Justice will come to cleanse the world if we are true.
Okay.
I don't think this is supposed to be a actual picture of this entity. I think this is a religious portrait in a church.
He's like representing.
Yeah.
He's like the envoy of
and we talked previously, I think based on the panel we saw in Chicago, where Vorthos Mike and Ristic Study Sam were talking about the style of portraits where you have a bunch of objects representing.
Yes.
And what was the
Edric Spymaster is like one
crest.
of the best
examples of that kind of thing,
right? Which is a just gorgeous piece of art.
Yeah, I can pull it up here too. Yeah. And this is a little bit like lower resolution. Yeah, there isn't as much detail here, but it feels the dice.
The dice really stand out, and they're very intentionally placed right there on his armrest.
And so it feels like this is showing us these associated objects in that same fashion. This is symbolism, and we, not living in this world, don't fully understand it all, but we can tell that it's there.
Yeah, the dice are an interesting inclusion here for me. I'm trying to figure out because normally dice are meant to represent chance. Yeah. Like fate that you can't control.
Right.
I'm not sure how that ties into their idea of justice
Right?
here.
Well, we have scales
We
of
do have
justice on the
scales.
hat.
That makes perfect sense.
I don't know what these other objects are here. There's books which associate with learning, I suppose. There's this parchment. This looks like it's called the hand of justice. So
Yeah.
it looks like someone passing judgment.
Yeah.
It's a judge. It's a ruler.
Yeah, the dice are very curious, and it looks
are.
as though they're positioned with in snake eyes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that is significant here.
Well, look at the ability. Tap 3 target white creatures you control to destroy any target creature.
Okay.
So it feels very much like this is judging someone and they are found wanting
Yes.
and expunged from existence. I'm surprised it didn't say exile. Well,
Exile.
it would have said removed from the game, but that's
Yeah.
what it feels like it's
It
doing.
does feel that way. This guy has a very judgmental stare. The next thing that comes to mind for me is that the other option, like, traditionally, dice would be pure chance.
Yeah.
Unless the dice are loaded.
Uh-huh.
And so if you're making the choices, it doesn't feel as much of a... If one person is deciding this,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel as much like justice.
Like, normally you view the outcome of events in life as being random. The hand of justice sets them on the
Yes.
values.
The hand of justice decides.
Yeah, I like that interpretation. And when it sets them on ones, it's tap 3 and
Yep.
destroy target creature.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to know what these other things represent. I
would
can't tell what this thing on the
too.
right is. It looks like a metronome, but surely it's not.
It kind of does. Yeah, the thing next to it, maybe, I don't know, there's like 2 lines extending away from it that kind of confuse
Yeah.
me in terms of like what that could be, because it looks at first glance like a candlestick.
This is a scale. This is another scale. We're seeing it at half of it. There it
Okay,
is.
that makes more sense. So yeah,
Yeah.
scales, classical
That
symbol
absolutely
of
makes sense
justice,
then, yep.
very, that works. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That makes more sense. It's just cropped out of the picture.
So yeah, that's really cool. But it confused me at the time, and it still kind of confused me. It's just such a person
very
representing
intriguing.
this avatar,
Yeah.
this 2/6. But that's my current interpretation,
Yeah.
and I think it's really cool.
It is. It's very memorable. Like, this is
Yeah.
one of the... There's a lot of Magic cards that are wonderful and do a great job of telling, flavor-wise and mechanically, like, what they
Yeah.
do. But they're not always as memorable as characters like this. Like,
Yeah.
I can definitely see why this caught the imaginations of your 8th grade playgroup.
Yeah. And then I think there's only one white card left, just scanning through here and making sure we're not missing any others. But that takes us to our remaining color hoser. Like I mentioned, each color in Fallen Empires has a card to hose one of its enemy colors. White has the Order of Lightbearer at common, and Heroism is the other one.
Yeah, so this is a 3-drop enchantment. Shout out to the skeletons in the background.
Hey!
So this is just a wild piece of art from Mark Poole. It features this valiant hero holding a baby.
Is that a baby? I thought it was
looks
a
like
duck.
a baby. Is it a... No, it's
No,
a
the
baby.
baby makes so much more
It would-
sense.
like, why would you...
I like it. I wish it was a duck, but
That would be-
fine.
That would be really
This
something.
makes more sense.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna get that altered on the.
You should get it altered into a duck.
Is this on the reserved list? It's not. I can get
Yay!
this so cheap. 12 cents. I'm gonna get
That's
this done.
so affordable. So this says you can sacrifice a white creature to have attacking red creatures deal no damage during combat this turn. The attacking player may pay 2 and a red for an attacking creature to have it deal damage as normal. So you
Yeah.
can force it through,
Yeah.
but it's going to cost you.
Flavor is amazing though.
Yeah.
You have a heroic noble sacrifice.
Yes.
Someone just gets in their way and stops this
Yeah,
charge
because
of
this
ability.
guy is so outnumbered, but he's trying to save this little baby from the skeleton ghouls behind him.
Yeah, that's how they view the Ebon Hand.
Yeah, this is more propaganda art.
Except no, this is anti-red, not anti-black.
Yeah,
so
so this is how they view
I don't
like
know.
the goblins and orcs or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're just like numerous and menacing, and Yeah,
I
this
don't
is
really
cool.
understand why they put the attacking creature may pay 2 and a red for an attacking creature. Maybe they just thought this is going to be too oppressive. Like, these players could just be
Yeah,
making
I
a white
mean,
creature each turn and sacking it, and
That
basically
would be kind of. I'm imagining playing against this, and if I'm playing like mono red, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess I'll die.
there was so much fog in early Magic though that it doesn't
Yeah.
seem like that would be an impediment. But
I mean,
okay,
this cost what 2 and a white, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's not even. I don't know.
I don't know. That's a weird one, but yeah, I dare someone to put this in a commander deck and
Yeah.
show other people that it exists.
Yes. Please include this in your Fallen Empires flavor deck.
Yes. So that's all of the white cards, but let's do what I failed to do last time and look at the lands that are associated with
Yes.
white. So we have the Acacian Store, the storage land, which, like the entire cycle, it comes into play tapped, and each turn, instead of untapping it, you can just put another counter on it, and eventually you choose to untap it and cash in all those counters to make that many white mana.
This is cool. I like this art. I like how it's kind of overlooking some water over here.
Yeah.
Again, we have the tree with no leaves, so we're kind of hinting at maybe we're getting closer into the winter
Yeah.
season. But yeah, this is a really cool fortress.
It is. We see so little of the places
Yeah.
in this set because the art is so focused on the figures. And I suppose that's true of most Magic sets, but it feels like in the modern era, we get a better sense of place. We see more of place. I don't know if that's because we just always have more lands. It
Well,
feels
I
like
think also at this era, like we're in Dominaria, right?
Dominion Prime.
Dominion Prime.
Yes.
And in the modern day, we hop around planes a lot more, and so I think there's more of an effort to show like where things are taking place. Where here it's kind of an assumption, like we're on Dominaria, we've been on Dominaria, we're gonna stay on Dominaria for a while. Like you kind of know what it looks like.
Yeah. But that is, I like the, this isn't as evocative as the red Dwarven Hold,
Yeah.
where they're clearly, literally stockpiling things, but combining the name and the art, it paints a nice picture. Yeah, they're
really
holding
cool.
up, they're,
Yeah, it's very Casterly Rock. I like it.
yeah. And then the ruins of Trocaire. Now, we've seen Trocaire mentioned a couple of times, so
Yes.
it's clearly a big, important battle when an entire fortress, city, gets sacked.
Yeah.
And we see
And
it
this
here.
is what's left of it.
Yeah, and it's in the process of falling apart. I don't know if this feels like it could be centuries later, but it also could be shortly after it was destroyed. And there's no one around. There's a little
No,
skull
I was
here
going
in
to
the
point
foreground.
out the tiny skull.
Yeah. I don't know what these sticks on the way are. That doesn't seem like a thing you normally have on the road, so I assume that's like a defensive
Maybe. Yeah.
it's not much to it, but it's some kind of attempt to make defensive battlements or something.
Or maybe what's left of some defensive battlements. I don't know.
Yeah. So that's those two. But then, as I mentioned earlier, we neglected to revisit to look at the green lands last time. So to just quickly reset the scene, the green conflict is between the elves and the Thalids, who are creating sapperlings, who they accidentally grew and as crops until they emerged.
They like intentionally grew as crops.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then accidentally.
They accidentally became sentient, maybe because of
Yeah.
using blood to fertilize them,
Maybe.
and took over and killed everyone.
Yeah.
So that narrative makes no sense to me with skeletons hanging from nooses.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that's about.
There was all that talk about multiple cards saying we're not sure if the Thalas are sentient. And like there's the picture of the one using the tools, so we're like, yeah, they probably. But this does not make sense.
Yeah, like whose skeletons are these?
So at best, this is just a depiction of some other conflict between like the Ebon Hand and the Order of Lightbearer were skirmishing, and
Yeah.
one.
And this was the battleground,
Yeah.
and this is what's left.
Yeah. So that is the trees full of neat, creepy holes. That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
But I think this is pretty low on my tier list of things fitting in the set.
It's kind of unsettling, and I kind of wonder if this seems like the kind of thing that they probably couldn't get through in modern day Magic.
Yeah.
Like the skeletons are tiny, they're not like the focus of this, but like this is a pretty unsettling image.
Yeah. But then the hollow trees, much nicer in my estimation. It's a lot less specific. It's just some trees in kind of a bayou setting. But they also have more holes than are usual in trees. So I think there's some unity. There was some concept of art direction here where the trees are just, I don't know, full of holes. They're hollow, literally. But they're storing things in them. Someone's storing things in them here. But I don't know. I like this art, but it's not particularly flavorful or meaningful in any way to the rest of the set. It's just cool.
I like it. It's interesting as a green card.
Yeah.
Because this reads to me more like a swamp based on the artistic depiction alone.
Yeah.
But it's pretty. I like it.
Yeah. It's dark and wintry is, I guess, that's sensing in. I don't know. Yeah, it's
I think
fine.
I'm just used to seeing with forests or lands that produce green, I'm used to seeing like lush green trees, more of that kind of thing. And then a lot of times with swamps, if they're depicting trees, they look more like this.
Yeah. I guess that implies this is a little more meaningful. This is showing a place in decline.
Yeah.
That's slowly dying, as kind of the entire world was, thanks to the impending ice age. So, all right, that actually gives a little more credit, but it's not my favorite among the lands. Then, did you want to talk about a couple of these artifacts before we sign off for the day?
Let's look at...
Do you want to look at the proto-equipments this time, or the discard random card effects this time?
Let's look at the proto-equipment, since we kind of touched on enchantments that could have been equipments,
Farrell's Mantle.
but weren't.
Yeah, it seems like a number of... They made... Taunus's weaponry was from the dark, right? Or, no, that was Antiquities, wasn't
Let's see. Taunus's weaponry.
Taunus's weaponry. Yeah, this is Antiquities. Because Taunus was Urza's protege in that story. Mono artifact.
Yeah.
So 2 and tap to give target creature 1/1 as long as this remains tapped. You may choose not to untap it. So they had in Antiquities, which was all about artifacts, they had clearly done some work innovating and tried to come up with something to implement this concept that we now know as equipment. Something that it's an artifact. Why can't a creature go pick up the artifact and do something with it? So Taunus's weaponry served that role, and it feels like these two are clearly riffing on that.
Yeah.
This also feels like these would be legendary now, flavor-wise. At least the Zellion sword. Zellion, this sounds like it's a specific person's, and both of them have this angel holding it.
Yeah.
There are no other angels who show up in Sarpedia. All these artifacts all seem so disconnected from the rest of this set.
This is such an interesting piece. So the Zellion sword, the flavor text says, "No sheath shall hold what finds its home in flesh."
Super aggressive.
Yeah, very aggro. And then you have this kind of blinded angel, which is often like a Lady Justice kind of depiction.
Yeah, that usually means justice is blind. And so I don't know if that's intended to be implied here, but I can't help but make that association.
Yeah, this does feel like it would probably be a legendary artifact just because of the name.
Yeah.
But it's a 3-drop. You pay 3 and tap it. Target creature gets 2/0 as long as this remains tapped, and you can choose not to untap it during your untap phase.
Yeah. The power level is obviously very poor, but it feels like the prototype of the swords.
Yeah.
Like the swords of fire and ice and everything.
Yeah, and so we kind of have this, like, early equip sort of cost thing where just is if you want to keep this effect going, you just choose not to untap this thing, and when you're ready to not have that on this target creature, go ahead and untap it and you can do it again.
These can be done at instant speed though. That's interesting, and I guess that's very purposeful that equipment can't do that by default because that causes problems.
Yeah.
And then the Spirit Shield is clearly just the complement to that. It gives toughness instead of strength, but otherwise it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, same artist on both of these, both illustrated by Scott Kirshner, and it kind of looks like the same sort of angelic figure who's holding the shield.
Yeah. It doesn't look like the exact same one, but it looks like the same category because the wings have a different texture. This one clearly has red hair, and I think the other one has blonde, though it might be obscured by the... But this one doesn't seem to be wearing a blindfold or anything like that.
It says, at times, survival must outweigh all other considerations. So this does pretty much the same thing for slightly less. It just pumps the toughness of the creature instead of the power.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's This almost looks like Catholic depiction of Mary
Yeah,
imagery
it's very
here on
Byzantine.
the Byzantine.
Yeah, like if you look up Byzantine iconography, it's very similar to this kind of depiction.
That's interesting. I wonder if that's just a reference that the artist was using, or if that's supposed to convey something in particular to us.
It could just be a stylistic choice.
To me, it conveys a religious element. And so does the text on the Zelian sword. I mean, it's dark, but it feels like prophetic, or it feels like there's a belief system here.
Yeah. And I think also showing like an angel bestowing the sword on somebody has that connotation to it as well. Yeah. But like this, whether or not this is meant to be symbolic or an actual angel like giving you the sword, this feels like, okay, this sword is like imbued with divine power.
Yeah.
Or you're going, which kind of ties in with some of the stuff we've seen, like at least with the white creatures, where we have some of these fanatical groups who feel like they are taking on like religious crusades.
Yeah.
Like that definitely ties in with that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, again, they don't really fit in with the rest of Fallen Empires in any way, from my judgment.
I mean, they don't seem like connected with anything else specifically,
I
but
guess
they're cool.
If we have this religious connotation, I guess you could say maybe they were part of the Order of Lightbearer.
Maybe
there were some relics by it, but we don't see any other angels showing up. So
and there's nothing that directly ties them to that order. They don't say that in the flavor text. There's nothing in the art that like really speaks to those cards.
But it is cool that they're a pair.
Yeah.
They have that symmetry. I do like them as just an early prototype of a concept, but
it's neat to see that concept kind of evolve into what we now know as equipment.
Yep.
Because in modern times, like, these would 100% be equipments.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. We have 2 remaining.
Yes.
Next time will be blue, and then the final
2 more
volume,
volumes.
6, will be the black cards.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
Bye.
Or are we doing red?
We started with red.
We started with red.
Yeah.
So we're on... we talked about green, so we must be on white.
Yeah.
Okay.